Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
By the end of this video, you'll have mastered the exact thinking techniques Steve Jobs used to transform Apple into a trillion-dollar company. Now, these aren't theoretical concepts. They're practical mental frameworks you can apply today to see opportunities others miss, to make better decisions, and create innovations that stand the test of time. These skills, these capabilities, this unique mindset that Steve had was directly observed by me over the many years of my time in Silicon Valley and across different touch points that Steve and I had over his lifetime. Now, let's take a look back. A 19-year-old college dropout sits cross-legged on the floor of Reed College dorm room, absorbed in a calligraphy class he's auditing after officially quitting school. Now, he's tracing the letter curves as he studied the spacing and typefaces and the balance of typography. To his classmates, this seemed utterly disconnected from any practical career path. Yet, this moment of seemingly aimless curiosity would spark a revolution. 7 years later, these same aesthetic principles would become the foundation for the Macintosh computer's revolutionary fonts, making personal computers feel profoundly human for the first time. That dropout was Steve Jobs, and his journey reveals something extraordinary about innovation itself. Here, try this. Try to think like Steve did back then. So take 30 seconds to write down one hobby or interest you have that seems completely unrelated to your work. Now, identify 3 specific principles or insights from that hobby. In my case, it could be my 3D printing work or my laser cutting work. And ask yourself, how might these principles solve problems in my day job? This is how Steve Jobs' mind worked every day, drawing unexpected connections that others often missed. Steve Jobs embodied a rare combination of thinking styles that set him apart from other tech leaders of his time. Now, the good news? These thinking patterns can be learned and applied immediately. Now, many of these, in fact, all of these, we've covered previously in the whole thinking series. So go over there or check the links below to check out the thinking series, which includes how to improve critical thinking skills and aesthetics thinking skills and design thinking skills and convergent thinking and divergent thinking. We've covered all of that. You want to go watch those videos. But let's start off with where Steve was really powerful. And number 1 was aesthetic skills, aesthetic thinking skills. So unlike tech executives who prioritize specifications, Steve understood that emotional connection through design was paramount. He's famous for saying, design is not just what it looks like or feels like. Design is how it works. So apply this today. Identify one product or service you offer. List 3 ways to enhance its aesthetic appeal without changing its function. And ask, how would this make users feel more connected to the experience? Now, the second thinking skill that Steve really applied was convergent thinking. Convergent thinking, reducing your options. But Steve paired the aesthetic thinking vision with this remarkable convergent thinking, a laser-like capability to eliminate anything that was a distraction. Now, upon returning to Apple in 1997, he eliminated 70% of Apple's products by drawing a simple 2x2 grid on a whiteboard. With consumers and professionals on one axis, desktops and portables on the other, allowing him to focus on making one great product in each quadrant. What would be the best commercial mobile product? What would be the best consumer mobile product? Rather than trying to be mediocre and having multiple products in each quadrant of the grid. Again, Steve is famous for saying, deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. So here's another quick exercise. Try this. Take out a piece of paper, draw your own 2x2 grid with your two most important business variables on each axis, and list your current projects or ideas. And in 60 seconds, not 2 hours, in 60 seconds, decide which ones eliminate by placing them over off the board in some kind of a penalty zone, the elimination quadrant. And therefore, then you now have a focus. This will allow you to experience firsthand how Jobs, really this convergent thinking, creates immediate clarity. And then share your results in the comments below. I'd love to hear how many did you eliminate of your products or your projects that were not really your best work, didn't allow your focus. The third thinking skill that Steve brought to the table was inspirational thinking. Jobs didn't just motivate teams with rational arguments or logic. He created what colleagues and the press called the Steve Jobs reality distortion field. It's a vision so compelling, it inspired people to achieve the impossible. You can create your own reality distortion field. Here's how Steve did it, and here's how you can do it. Choose one project you're currently working on, just one. Write a one-sentence vision that captures its transformative potential. Share this vision with someone and note their emotional response. Did they have an emotional response? And then refine it until it creates genuine excitement. And I know how it looked like when Steve could just deliver these off the cuff, but I can tell you from experience that he worked it, he practiced it, he tested it, he evaluated, and he continued to refine that message. So refine until it elicits a genuine level of excitement. The fourth thinking skill that Steve brought to the table was systems thinking. What made Jobs truly revolutionary was how he integrated these thinking styles with systems thinking. While he could focus on the minutest of details, obsessing, for instance, over the exact shade of white for the Apple Store bags. And yes, that is a true story. Steve obsessed over that exact shade of white for the bags that you carry out when you go to the Apple Store. He simultaneously maintained a panoramic view of how products all fit together into large ecosystems. So here's a systems mapping exercise. Choose one product or service that you are working on now. Map all your touch points and user experiences, both before they start using your product or service, during, and after using it. Identify 3 connections between touch points that others might miss, and then find one small detail that can improve the entire system. That's it. Now, let's take a step back. Jobs approached problem solving with a distinctive methodology. He had these thinking skills, but he also had this methodology of how he worked through problems and opportunities. So we're going to break it down into actionable steps that you can implement immediately. And there are 6 steps to what I call the Jobs method. Step 1, start with user experience, not technology. Whenever he was starting to work on something new, a new product, a new concept, whatever, started with user experience, not the technology underneath. When he was developing the iPod, Steve didn't begin with storage specifications. He crystallized the project into a human experience, the famous 1,000 songs in your pocket. This simple phase guided every decision. So how do you apply this experience first to what you're working on? For your current project, complete the sentence, quote, "My users want to feel blank when using this." My users want to feel what? Excitement, happiness, thrilling, intrigue, curiosity. My users want to feel what when using this? And 2, create a simple phrase that captures that core experience, like 1,000 songs in your pocket. Now, if you had said, my users wanted to feel convenience when using this, you notice the word convenience is not in 1,000 songs in your pocket, because that's really almost explicit, right? But how do they feel about it? Convenience being, I've got 1,000 songs in my pocket. Conveys that convenience, but in an exciting way, in a very simple set of terms that get people really excited about that iPod project. 3, test all decisions against this experience statement. Once you define what that experience is, what your users want from your product, that becomes the cornerstone. Nail it. Get that right, and then test every decision you make against that experience. Step 2 of the 6-step process: simplify ruthlessly. Once Jobs had a vision for the user experience, he would simplify it to its absolute essence. He's quoted as saying, simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. So how do you do a simplification? Let's talk this through for your product. So choose one product, service, or process that you work with. List all the features and all the steps. Ask for each one, would removing this fundamentally harm the core experience? 4, eliminate everything that isn't absolutely essential. 5, time yourself. Can you remove 30% in the next 5 minutes? Now, I can tell you from my experience as the CTO at HP that engineers, product people love to feature load in thousands and thousands of features, and they all have excuses for it. Go back to the experience. Does this support enable the experience you want that the customers are expecting? They want excitement. They want immersion. They want happiness. They want convenience. They want productivity. Whatever it is they want, test everything and get rid of everything that isn't fundamental. Step 3 of the 6-step process for Steve Jobs: connect the dots differently. Steve had this extraordinary ability to synthesize ideas from disparate fields. He would take a look at everything from plants and animals to architecture to consumer packaged goods companies, and he would make these connections. You have to get good at looking outside of your industry and space and make these connections, what we would call cross-domain innovation. So 1, identify that problem that you're working on. What's the problem you want to think about? 2, choose 3 completely unrelated fields. Nature, we've talked about this on this show before, about biomimicry, where you use nature to inspire your ideas. You could also be architecture. I was originally an architecture major. That tends to be one I go to. It could be something as simple as cooking. 3, for each of those fields, list 2 or 3 principles or approaches the field uses successfully. In the case of architecture, it's about what's called balance. Your design has to have a sense of feeling of balance. Otherwise, people walking into buildings or walking into houses that are out of balance will feel uncomfortable. So how would you apply balance to a product design as an example? 4, force connections. How might each of those principles, don't cherry pick, make your brain really work it to look at each of those principles from nature, architecture, cooking, how that principle from cooking could solve your problem. The 4th of the 6-step Steve Jobs process: envision the complete experience. Jobs insisted on controlling the entire user journey, eliminating seams between hardware, software, services, and retail environments. So map your user experiences. Draw a horizontal line representing your customer's journey. Mark every touch point on that horizontal line where they interact with your product or service. Circle points where the experience feels disconnected, not quite right. And then identify who controls each touch point, and then develop a specific way to create more integrated experience at those circle points. An example, in the early days of the iPod, Apple actually came and worked with us at HP because HP at that time controlled 10% of all the consumer electronics retail shelf space. And Apple did not have that reach into retail. And they realized that the iPod was not a product just to sit in the area next to a laptop. It needed to be in the more broader consumer electronics space. And HP had built up a phenomenal presence in retail, starting with, get this, go back in history, the HP calculator. An HP calculator was carried by, leading retailers like Macy's and et cetera, that totally transformed HP back in the day. So Apple came to HP. We helped take it. We created an HP version or an HP branded version of that Apple iPod to get it into the market. But then Steve really dug deep on retail and realized that disconnected experience was rough. And it was rough. Selling other people's products, putting other people's products into your distribution channel, that's a hard way to go. And so in this case, that's what caused Steve to start studying retail and figure out how Apple could create its own retail experience. And believe me, the Apple retail experience is pretty darn strong. So that's an example of doing these connections, figuring out how the experience is, figuring out what you control, figuring out what you don't control, and then really focus in on how do you take that one area, in this case, the retail experience, which kind of was okay, but not great. How do you transform it? Steve built Apple stores. Step 5 of the 6-step Steve Jobs process is prototype, test, and iterate. Now, despite Steve's visionary reputation, Steve was also intensely practical about testing ideas. That first iPhone went through multiple complete redesigns before it ever launched. So here's a rapid prototype challenge. And most people want to shortchange this. You can't. You got to do it. Create a simple version of your idea in 24 hours or less. Don't go off into a 3-month project and hiring a design firm. Go borrow your kid's Play-Doh, your markers or coloring pencils that your spouse uses for adult coloring books. Use a 3D printer, whatever it is you got. Create a simple version of your idea in 24 hours or less. 2, test it with 3 actual users, not your family, not your friends. Take it out, show it to people. It's what I would call that guerrilla testing of your ideas. There's an episode on this. Go into the catalog, you can find it, talking about how you go to a bar and talk to a random person, or how I took my team at HP and we actually went to New York, Times Square, walked into a Starbucks and sat down to a random person we didn't know to test the idea. Test with 3 actual users you do not know. 3, identify their biggest pain point, get their feedback. 4, redesign, focusing only on that pain point. Don't charge changing 5 things. If someone says it's too heavy, too big, too ugly, too not the right color, not the right feature, too complex, whatever it is, figure out that one real big pain point and then focus on it until you get that right. Then get the next pain point and work on that. That's how you really get it narrowed down without adding in bloat to your innovation. And the key here is repeat it, iterate, build the next prototype, show it to 3 people, get their pain point, redesign it, go talk to 3 people, right? Keep going. And step 6, push beyond good enough. This is probably what I would say is one of Steve's really kind of superpowers. Jobs insisted on excellence in every detail, even things that customers would never see. Like, for instance, in the original Mac, he rejected the motherboard design because the motherboard was not beautiful enough. Yeah, get that right. How many have you ever opened up your Mac to look at the motherboard? I had a 1984 Mac. In fact, I wrote software that was installed on the 1984 Mac. Back in the day, that's a long time ago. But Steve rejected the design of the motherboard, not because of feature function, but because the motherboard was not beautiful enough. Why was that important? Because that sent the message to his entire team about the level and the bar of quality he was expecting. So let's walk through what I would call a detailed excellence audit. Choose the one project you're working on. It could have been the same project across all these exercises we just did. Identify 3 hidden details that users might never consciously notice. And then 3, improve each detail beyond what seems necessary. Go to the end, push it. And 4, note how this shifts your entire approach to quality. Because now you're also paying attention to things that you might have just skimmed over because that's the way everybody does it, to how do you really raise the bar on that quality. Now, Jobs' thinking methods are being actively applied by innovation organizations today. They're not exclusive to Apple. It's probably the number one question I get. Oh, I want to be more like Apple. Fine. But it's not about Apple. It's about improving your thinking skills. And Jobs' thinking methods can be applied to any organization across any industry. We're going to talk about 3 examples. These are standout examples with the specific lessons you can apply, and you can apply them today. So the first case study is Airbnb. Airbnb revolutionized travel accommodation by applying several of Jobs' key thinking approaches. So the founders, Brian Chesky and Joe Giba, studied Jobs extensively and implemented his principles in their business model. Like Steve Jobs did with iPod, which was 1,000 songs in your pocket, they started with a clear, human-centered experience goal. And that is, belong anywhere. This experience-first approach guided their entire platform development. So how can you apply this? Create an experience statement for your product or service in 7 words or less. Yes, you can use ChatGPT or Claude to help you get it down to those 7 words. Get it down to 7 words or less. Something that you can say, the person on the other side is going to go, ooh, got it. Ask 5 customers to describe how your offering makes them feel. Identify that emotional benefit that resonates more strongly. And redesign one element to enhance that emotional benefit. And then keep at it. Now, in the case of Airbnb, they didn't have to worry about all the back end pieces of the hotel management because they didn't own the properties. They could focus on that front end, property owners, and the connection to the people looking for someplace to stay. How do you make that experience? How do you continuously improve it? The next case study is Tesla. Tesla was fundamentally reimagined the automotive industry by applying Steve's cross-domain connection and complete experience design approaches. Now, I've shared my view. I've done meetings with Elon. I did a whole episode on one meeting that I had with Elon, which I thought was kind of insightful into how Elon thinks. But Elon is very, very unique in his ability to make all of these kind of focuses that he has done. But how did he apply it at Tesla? Well, he applied it by not accepting those assumptions and challenging on those things that were going to have the biggest impact. So how can you apply it? So identify, I don't know what you want to call it, a battery or core technology in your field that everyone accepts as a limitation. Everybody in the sustainability space recognizes that battery power density, how much battery energy you can store per cubic centimeter of battery material, is a constraining factor, right? Everybody accepts as a limitation. In the case of yourself, question if that limitation is truly fixed or it's simply accepted by convention. And then explore at least 3 technologies from outside your field that might help overcome this limitation. And then apply a jobs level systems thinking by mapping the entire ecosystem impact if that limitation was removed. In the case of Tesla with batteries, Elon quickly realized, and we realized this at HP, yeah, you can continue to improve battery, but battery density only improves about 10% a year, yet you got Moore's law, far outstripping that pace. But you could apply energy conservation to other things. So like processors and displays and memory and networking and all those types of things, and actually make the battery last much, much longer than just focusing on the chemistry. You still have to work on the chemistry of battery, but you're applying all the other parts of the ecosystem to be more efficient, to require less battery, and therefore then become more efficient. And then Elon did develop the things like the superchargers and those types of things to reduce the burden or the friction of having an EV. So, great example. Think about it. How do you apply it to your project? Third case study, Disney. Disney's application of Jobs' thinking methods is perhaps the most direct, given the close relationship through Pixar, which Steve owned before selling it to Disney, making his family one of the largest private owners of Disney. And not to mention that past CEOs, in some cases even the current CEOs, have previously been on Apple's board. So how can you apply Apple's, this Disney approach? Choose one product or service you offer. Identify all the touch points where users interact with it. Find the transition points where the experience becomes disjointed. And then apply Jobs' complete experience, thinking to create a seamless journey. And then test that emotional impact on the seamless experience. Let's take the Star Wars experience. If you haven't been to Disney World or Disneyland recently, we go to Disney World fairly often with the grandkids, and they love the Star Wars experience. Why? Well, as I understand it, Disney designed that and threw out literally dozens of designs until they finally got it just right. Understanding what the customer flow was going to be, the touch points, the experiences, the emotional response from people coming in, and not just the kids, but the Star Wars fans, the adults who grew up with Star Wars. All of that was considered, and they did not sacrifice. They spent the time really thinking about the seamless experience and testing it, not just with themselves, but testing it with users before locking it down and putting it in place. And I can tell you, they did a phenomenal job. Now, this all sounds easy, but implementing job style thinking comes with significant challenges. So let's explore some of the practical solutions to overcome this. First one is the perfectionism paradox. Jobs perfectionism sometimes led to paralysis or you could say missed opportunities. Now you need to balance this perfectionism. So to do that is, for your current project, identify 3 hero features that deserve the perfectionism attention. 3 areas where good enough is maybe could be acceptable. Set clear time boxes. I will perfect this feature for exactly 2 hours, then move on, or 2 days, or the next 30 days. But once at that point, time box it, move on. 3, create a perfectionism budget. Allocate your limited perfectionism resources where they will have maximum impact. So you've got to really limit I wouldn't say eliminate perfectionism. That's not, if you think about Apple, you're going, wow, they did some great things. Look, Apple's not perfect. They've got some things in there. If you look at like build quality of laptops at Apple and you compare it to all the other laptop manufacturers, they actually tend to be towards the bottom. The failure rate, the warranty rate that Apple laptops have is higher than other laptop manufacturers. They don't have, they have about 3.5%, 4% market share. They don't have as much big as volume as the collective PC laptop space. But there are things that Apple could do on that side to improve it, but they choose not to. They want it's areas that is not something that's a high priority for them. So they've limited that perfectionism to perfect other things. You need to do the same thing. 2, the reality distortion challenge. While Jobs' reality distortion field inspired extraordinary achievements, it also created unrealistic expectations that could burn out your teams. Trust me. So how do you do this? So write your ambitious vision on concrete terms. List the 3 biggest obstacles to achieving it. And this is something Steve never did. He never really acknowledged the obstacles. So acknowledge them. Acknowledge these challenges openly with the team, and then create mini milestones that build confidence. How are we going to knock down this challenge? How are we going to knock down this challenge? And then celebrate progress. It's not about the big stage reveal like, oh, one more thing. It is really about building that momentum with that team that's delivering this vision a little bit at a time. Number 3, the integration complexity problem. Jobs insisted on controlling the entire experience, creating extraordinary products, but also led to closed systems that limited compatibility. Things like the App Store or the music systems, and etc. Right? Because Steve wanted to control everything. Now, you can argue that Apple can do that, given their size. They're a $1 trillion company. Maybe you're a small startup. You're going, I can't control that all. But how do you balance this integration mix, this matrix that you've got to pull together to deliver and reach and touch your potential market? First off, map your product or service ecosystem. What are all your dependencies, your suppliers, your distribution channels, etc.? Categorize each element as either must control, because it affects the core experience, can integrate, so you can enhance without risk, or should be open, benefits from outside innovation, like third-party application developers or applications running on your device, etc. And then develop specific integration strategies for each category. Now, the 4th risk, if you want to apply Steve's 6-step methodology, is the empathy gap. Now, it's perhaps Steve's most significant weakness was really his often limited empathy for colleagues and partners. And boy, can I tell stories on my personal experience on this one. So, Steve was famous within Apple of even walking around, running into people maybe that he didn't know at Apple. He'd ask them what they did. They would fumble with some words and try to describe what they did. Steve would look at them and say, we don't need that. You're fired. And then walk away. The story goes that it got to the point where HR had to send people that would follow Steve around. And if he fired somebody, the HR person would come up behind them and go, no, you're not fired. Just go back to your cube, continue doing. But Steve had this mental process that made it very clear on what was contributing value and what was not contributing value. But how do you drive an empathy-driven set of excellence? So we've talked about this in some articles I recently wrote, but how do you provide feedback? And before providing feedback, ask yourself, what's the person's intention here? Is this that I didn't communicate the vision correctly? They didn't understand the vision correctly? Or Maybe they just made a decision on their own that led us down a path that could be good or bad. 2, practice delivering high standards with specific appreciation. Bring your team up, don't knock your team down. Draw them up to deliver better, higher quality experiences, products, services with appreciation and clear vision. 3, create a user empathy map for your products. So understand everything from your customers to your employees. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they saying? What are they doing? Use this map to guide decisions about features and experiences. So take these concepts, everything we've discovered, beyond theory with this practical framework. 1, connection day. Schedule 1 hour each week to explore a field completely unrelated to your work, something completely different, hobbies, whatever. My case for the last 3, 4, 5 months has been really getting into the 3D printing world because I think that's fundamentally going to change the concept of manufacturing in the not too distant future. 2, a ruthless simplification session. Monthly review of all your projects using Jobs' what to say no to methods. 3, experience audit. Quarterly, map the complete experience of your products and services from the user's perspective and identify those friction points and then get them fixed. Now, I'm going to give you, so those are things that you can do every week to kind of exercise it, but let's get a little bit more tactical. I'm going to challenge you to apply one Steve Jobs thinking each day for the next week. The ones that I just talked to, those previous ones, those are over extended time. The best way to learn a new thinking skill is to apply it right away. So here are the thinking techniques, one for each day for the next 7 days. Build it into a habit. Day 1, aesthetic thinking. Redesign one element of your work, how it looks, how that whole experience feels. 2, convergent thinking. Eliminate one project, go through your entire project list, dump one, take one thing off your to-do list, dump it, right? Or maybe get rid of a feature. Day 3, inspirational thinking. Create a compelling vision statement, whether it's to an existing project to maybe help solve all of the team understanding the vision, or maybe this is you're creating a new compelling vision for a new project you want to start. Day 4, systems thinking. Map the ecosystem of your products and services and see how it all flows and how it plugs together. Day 5, start with the user experience. Interview one user about their needs. Go talk to real users and look at their pain and have that help you understand where there's a problem and maybe an opportunity. Day 6, simplify ruthlessly. Remove complexity from one process in your organization. And then day 7, connect the dots. Explore an unrelated field to inspire what it is that you're working on. And then share your results with our community. You can do it by the hashtag of the Jobs Challenge, or you can post it in the comments below. So we've decoded the thinking pattern that allowed Steve Jobs to revolutionize multiple industries. These tools are now yours to apply. Now, everything's in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about, oh my God, did I get all the right notes? So I got to re-listen to this. Everything in the details that I just went through are in the show notes, so go check that out. But the key here is start with humans and experience, not technology and specifications. Simplify ruthlessly by eliminating everything non-essential. Connect ideas across domains that others see as really unrelated. Design complete ecosystems, not isolated products. Prototype rapidly and be willing to start over, and push beyond good enough to create emotional connections. So what's coming up next? In our next installment on this series, we're going to explore how Bill Gates' thinking style offers a fascinating counterpoint to Steve Jobs' approach. While both men transformed technology forever, They did so using absolutely opposite cognitive methods. Where Jobs was intuitive, Gates was methodical. Where Jobs focused on aesthetic perfection, Gates prioritized functional ubiquity. The most adaptable thinkers know when to apply Steve Jobs' synthetic creativity and when to leverage Gates' analytic precision, a cognitive flexibility that can solve problems neither approach could address alone. So, if you found value in this exploration of revolutionary thinking and how Steve Jobs think, or this whole series, please subscribe now and hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss the upcoming episode on Bill Gates and all of our content. Also, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon, where you'll get access to exclusive content, community member-only chats, live streams from here in the studio, and many other benefits. Links to the Patreon are in the description. Until next time, remember, the people who think they are crazy enough to change the world are the ones who do. What one Jobs thinking technique will you try today? Let me know in the comments below. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.